Hey, and welcome to All Access Live. I'm John Samuel, and today we have a very special guest. We have my friend Mike May, who is a Olympian. He's a CEO, founder, and a luminary in the wayfinding space. And just so thankful to have you here today, Mike.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, John. I'm sorry I'm not in Raleigh, Durham visiting you, but in lieu of that, this connection sounds like the best way to go.
Yeah, where are you right now?
I'm in Davis, California at the moment. I live in Reno, but my wife is in Davis, so I'm bouncing back and forth between the two.
Okay, cool. And so, Mike, you and I've been friends now for a few years, and you actually are the person who actually encouraged me. Really, it was the final straw to encourage me to get a white cane, and so I'm always thankful and indebted to you for that. But
Well, I
you've been
remember
living
that,
in.
John, and I appreciated the fact that you were open to it. You know, it's such a struggle when somebody's low vision. It's like when somebody's old and they have to give up driving
Yeah.
that it's the final straw that finally says, you know, I'm old, I can't drive anymore. And with a cane, it's sort of, okay, I'm blind, I'm acknowledging that, and that's a huge step for somebody to take.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the one thing to accept that you're blind, then it's also the aspect of letting other people know that you're blind. And I think that was one of those obstacles that we had to overcome. But you know, I think it was meeting you and seeing how you were able to navigate just so confidently around and that was something. And your dog Johnny, right? So I think you guys as a
I
team
know
just showed
your
me.
your namesake.
Yeah, my mistake. So it's interesting, as a white person getting around with a white cane, it was game changing for me. But one of the one of the coolest things, or not, just the one aspect of you is the fact that you're a former, gold medalist. And how was it for you to be able to just I understand the factor just being able to navigate as an individual, well, who is blind or low vision, but skiing, how was that? How did you get into that?
Well, I didn't ski until I was 27 years old. Friends
Oh,
had been
really?
encouraging me to do it, and I didn't get around to it. But once I tried it, I was hooked. And part of it was that skiing is such a visual sport. I mean, next to, I don't know, something like tennis. These sports are very visual, and when you can accomplish them as a blind person, you're really throwing off any residual bonds of being tied down or mired in any particular thing, because you're moving fast or you can move fast, and you may start out in an attached or some kind of way of being guided, but eventually you're skiing unattached with a guide in front of you. They used to have the guide behind in the olden days, but now
Yeah.
most people ski with the guide in front, and it's such a liberating feeling.
Yeah. So Mike, how did you make the decision to to have the guide behind you? Because I know that, right. I mean, having it in front of you was kind of the way that it was done. But how did you kind of come up with that idea?
The flip side, the
Oh,
guide
okay.
was
Okay.
behind because it's easier for the guide if they're skiing down the hill and the blind guy's in front of them. It's easy for them to just tell you a little to your left, a little to your right.
Yeah.
And it kind of works in a recreational, intermediate, or beginner skiing situation. But you get going any faster, and as a blind person, I want the final word in going the direction the guide tells me. If they say left and they mean right, if they're in front of me, then I know because I'm hearing their voice and I'm going to go where
Yeah.
their voice is, not what they say. If it's the other way around and they're behind you and they say left and they mean right, there could be consequences. And there's
Yeah.
also a lot more precision when you're skiing gates in a racing situation. Sighted people ski right over those gates. I mean, they're a
Mm,
millimeter on one side or the other, and they actually hit the gates with their arms.
yeah.
A blind person has an awfully hard time getting that kind of precision. And so you might ski, if you're good, a foot away from those gates with a guide. And there's no way the guide could guide you with that precision from behind. But in front, you hear their skis, you get a couple feet behind their skis, and you hear their voice in their skis, and you can go pretty quickly around those gates back and forth.
So, I mean, I've ridden a tandem bike and I've, climbed, climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my buddy, and there's a lot of trust. So, I can only imagine there's so much trust that you have when skiing with someone. And how is that? Like, is it somebody? How did you get started? Was there somebody you knew? And uh, how was that?
Yeah, I was fortunate. The person who started the blind ski program that I first went to, Ron Salviolo in Kirkwood, California, which is one of those places, by the way, that's evacuated and being threatened by the fires.
Yeah, so sad.
We, um, fortunately, he was running the program when we hooked up as partners, as skiers together, and we skied together for year after year, and was a huge benefit from many standpoints. Number one, we liked each other, we liked hanging out, and when we're skiing around the world together and meeting people, it was fun to do it together. And when we competed, most of the other competitors were lucky if they'd had the same guide for a year or
Yeah,
maybe 2 years. And Ron and I, we had each other for 5, 10, 20 years, and you get to be so trusting and so understanding of each other's skiing styles when you've been together that long that it really makes for an amazing dynamic duo.
yeah. And so, were the two of you who competed in the Olympics together?
Yeah, we are before the first Paralympics wasn't until I don't even think 88, probably 92.
Really?
So
Oh wow.
yeah, so they used to call it things like Winter World Games for the disabled. And the
Okay.
first one of those we went to was in 82 in Switzerland, and then 84 in Innsbruck, Austria. And in those, we won 3 gold medals and then 3 bronze medals. And the fun thing was that in 82, when we won significantly and got 3 golds, we were the only team with the guide in front. Everybody else was skiing with the guide behind.
Yeah.
So guess what? By 1984,
Yeah.
everybody had switched. And so we were sort of beaten by our own technique because there were some other people who did a good job and they were skiing with the guide in front, which is much more effective in racing.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. Well, it's also interesting that they were, learning from what you were doing. And again, that's you being a trailblazer, I think, for a lot of people in the blind community and just in general. You know, um,
Well, looking back on it, that is really one of the legacies of our skiing together. And as part of that legacy, when we, through a bizarre set of circumstances, went to Sarajevo in 1984 for the regular Olympics, there was a demonstration run of disabled skiers, but it only included male amputees.
hmm,
And this was in the quest to develop the Paralympics.
okay.
And so when we went there and the disabled men had skied down, and Ron and I were there accompanying them, cheering them on, and we were also, I had a microphone and camera, and we were reporting on the event for KCBS radio in San Francisco. We just said, hey, there's nobody here, nobody in the gate, so let's just go. So we just went, we jumped in the gates and we skied down and we came across the finish line, the first blind skier duo ever in Olympic history to do that. And we weren't invited, but we did it.
I love it. I remember reading your book, Crashing Through, and reading that, and it just you know it's so funny and just you know it's a gusto that you have. I think that's awesome. Uh, but as when you so how many times did you compete in the games total?
Well, it was those 2 years that we competed, and and the funny thing is, after that, we become part of the celebrity circuit. So, we'd be invited to these events in Vail and Whistler,
Yeah.
along with the able-bodied skiers, famous skiers like Phil Mayer and Bill Johnson and
Hmm.
all these different skiers, and we got to ski alongside them. 88, we went to Calgary, and we're just observing. So it was just those years in the 80s when we competed, and
Yeah.
after that, it was. Um, I went back in 2010 as a representative of President Obama on the U.S. White House uh, committee that was at the Paralympics in Vancouver.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
What is it like? I've always wondered, I'm sure other people have been wondering, like, what is it like to be on the like the village, the Olympic Village?
It's pretty amazing because I mean, it's a combination of being really elite and cush, but it's also dorms.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so it's a combination of things, but you're in this very privileged area. And as an athlete, it was just fun to be around all of this energy of other competitors. And then as a representative of the White House, it was really fun to go in there and to meet these people and encourage them and support them in their lead up to their competitions.
That's awesome. And so, I mean, you've met a lot of presidents, haven't you? Like I've seen some videos of you. How many presidents have you met?
Well, five now because I met as a result of the some of those competitions. Well, President Reagan acknowledged me at the White House, and this is before the Paralympics, but we were invited along with the able-bodied ski team. And in his remarks, he commended me for my skiing. And to
How
hear my
cool is
name
that?
called out by the President of the United States, and this was mind-boggling. I thought I was hearing something.
Yeah,
And then after the 2010 Paralympics, we went to the White House and met with President Obama, Vice President Biden, their wives, and a few other people. So I haven't met President Obama, President Biden as a president, but
yeah.
when he was VP. And then
That,
President Carter, when I worked at the CIA, I met him briefly, just a handshake.
yeah.
The best part was really meeting with President Obama in an actual meeting discussing what things could be done for people who are disabled that would be a real moonshot. And there was about 11 people who were disabled. I was the only blind person
Oh, wow.
representing our group, and that was phenomenal to have that opportunity.
That's super cool. I know you just glossed over the CIA, but that's, again, yes, the people hearing this, yes, Mike has also formerly worked for the CIA. And, but, when you were at that table with President Obama, with those other folks, to talk about what could be done for the disabled community, what were some of the things that, are you able to talk about any of those things or anything that you brought up?
Well, the tough part was that, of course, not all blind people are the same, as we
Oh, yeah,
know.
for
Not
sure.
all
Yeah.
disabled people are the same. So when
Yeah.
you ask for a moonshot, there's not one thing that applies to all of us all of the time. I'd say that probably the biggest thing that came across that was a common thread among most disabilities were medical issues,
Hmm.
and often more so for a person who's paralyzed or quadriplegic. I mean, everything from hospital care to getting around, transportation's more complicated. But we discussed all of these things. Accessibility, of course, in 2010, a lot of things hadn't really happened yet.
Yeah.
Or I guess when we met with him, it was 2009. The iPhone was just barely on
Oh,
the
just a couple
scene.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was hard to come up with that, and it was a real challenge. There was an organization called X Prize, and I turned to them somewhat to look at because there's been moonshot kinds of things done with X Prize, and I talked to them about, well, what is it we could do for blind people, not for all disabilities, but what's one thing we could do for blind people, and the the thing that came to the surface when we had some focus groups around this was something that I ultimately called help. And I thought of the Beatles song, and I won't sing it for you, but help. I need somebody, not just anybody. And that's something that's um, as much as we want to be independent. There's times we just need to ask for sighted assistance. We have things like IRA and Be My Eyes
Yeah.
that do that now. Those weren't around then, so that's a step in that direction. But when you go into a store, and I'm sure we'll get to good maps, but you want to navigate to things, but sometimes you just want to ask somebody, I don't want to go browsing all day. Just take me to
Yep.
this particular place. And if you could have an agent just appear next to you right away to give you assistance, that would make the whole process of going out shopping so much less painful.
Yeah, for sure. No, you're right. Yeah, I've been thinking about it when, I haven't been to the store that often, but recently I went a couple weeks ago, and I was just, in the aisle, and they have these kiosks where you can swipe the barcode and get the price. But part of me was wondering if they could just have these virtual assistants around that could just somehow make it much more, um, you know, make that process easier for us, rather than that autonomy that we could have by, you know, with different technologies. But
Yeah, when kiosks are a good example of things that are 99% inaccessible, but
yeah,
as you may know now, there's a version of JAWS that can go on kiosks, and so for those providers who are willing to add that
yep.
software to the kiosks, they can be made accessible. And I had the opportunity to try one. I know they're going in at a lot of McDonald's
Oh, very
and
cool.
and other places, so you can take care of
Soon.
things and browse independently.
That's awesome. You know, you mean you touched on Good Maps. Can you explain what you're doing, you know, now at Good Maps, and just what Good Maps is doing?
Well, the big picture is that I think one's level of blindness is not about your visual acuity, it's about your life acuity. And
Hmm.
life acuity is a function of how much you get out and about. And this applies to recreation and to jobs. And we all know how difficult it is to get employed and stay employed. Um, but all of that is tied to how well you get around. And
Yeah.
so with accessible navigation that's come from the apps I've been working on for 25 years, like the Sendero products,
Yeah.
and now there's a number of others. Um, the better those are, the easier they are to use, the cheaper they are, the more likely they're going to enhance people's ability to comfortably get out and about on their own. So after leaving my company Sendero Group and closing it down in 2018, a couple of years later, 2019, I came back to Good Maps, which had just been formed as an offshoot of the national, as the American Printing House for the
Yeah.
Blind.
APH.
Um, Good Maps was formed, and I was offered the chance to join them and to become part of developing some new technology that focused on indoor navigation. So you think malls, airports, baseball stadiums for that matter.
Yeah.
So um, that has been done in the last 5 to 7 years with Bluetooth beacons as a way of referencing indoors because GPS doesn't work indoors. But is there a way to minimize infrastructure development in order to have indoor navigation? And what we've come up with is a LiDAR camera-based solution that does offer that possibility. So now one of our mappers can go into your building, walk around. I mean, picture a big building like LCI
Yeah.
and up and down all those hallways, and you've got a lot of blind people that work there. If somebody wanted to find their way to HR, it could be a little bit complicated. But if the whole building was mapped and one could just use their app with their camera exposed, once we've mapped the building with the LiDAR and the camera, then the blind person can come in with the Good Maps Explore app, which is
Hmm.
free, and walk down the hallways and be guided, turn left, turn right, and tell you the business, the points of interest or offices that you're passing.
Yeah. Could you explain what LiDAR is?
LiDAR is a laser ranging device that was best known for Google going down the streets and mapping very specifically businesses and houses and streets
Hmm.
in a very fancy van with all of these turrets on the top.
Yeah.
Well, now we use that LiDAR, that laser light to walk through a building. It bounces off the walls and the ceiling and the floors and everything that's in there, and it gives for every one of those beams, and there's millions and millions of them, everyone has a position associated with them. That beam and that association are then recorded in the cloud for a 3D image of your entire space. And then that gets boiled down to something that's named and as shows hallways and rooms and spaces in that indoor way that you couldn't do with other techniques. That's where you use a camera in conjunction with the LiDAR, but it's
Yeah.
a combination of those two imaging devices that makes it work.
That's so cool. It's so cool. And it's I love the and you're right. It's like confidence about getting around, that mobility that we have, and that confidence that we get from it. And I think it goes back to, you know, the guidance you gave me to get my own cane, to gain that independence. And I love what you're doing at Good Maps. And thank you for just being, you know, a leader in so many ways. And Mike, I hope that you'll come back again because I want to share. There's so like for folks, Mike is like probably he's the most interesting man in the world. He's like the Dos Equis guy. If there, it's from your childhood to working, your master's, John Hopkins, and gosh, traveling the world and everything you've done, creating businesses and being my friend. I'm just so thankful. And,
Well,
but Mike,
it's my pleasure, and and you've done a lot of amazing things. So I think when we got together over a beer and shared life stories, I think we really enjoyed getting to know each other's backstories. And so I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
no, thank you. And but Mike, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, certainly they can find out more about Good Maps at goodmaps.com. You can go to the App Store on Android or iOS and get the free Explore app. Crashingthrough.com has all the information about the book and that business. And of course, you can email me, Mike at goodmaps.com.
Awesome. And the book, oh my gosh, it is. It added a whole new layer of who you were and everything. And again, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time. And again, please tune in next week on Thursdays at 12 p.m. And we are just so excited to be sharing different stories like Mike's. And again, Mike, please, I really am. I really do want to have you back on. I think it's just so cool to share your own experiences. And so thanks again, Mike.
My pleasure.